Welcome to our first Zoom session. Thank you for your participation. And now I'd like to introduce you Wasi Tasfai, who is an activist in the community.
Start with is I will just give you a very short description of the situation in Ethiopia, because this is for the second gen. And so what I will do is I will start with a little bit history, not a lot, because there's so much to unpack. And then later when you go into the work groups, you will have more things. The purpose of this event is really to inform and educate second-gen Ethiopian Americans and friends on this current situation. We also want to empower you to articulate yourselves when confronted with the misinformation and unethical reporting on Ethiopia. Our hope is that you, the second gen, be what the Jews are for Israel and the Irish are for Ireland for Ethiopia, by actively supporting her in times of need and otherwise. So I will give you a very brief background, and the rest, like I said earlier, you will hear in your groups. The TPLF, Tigray People's Liberation Front, ruled Ethiopia with an iron fist for 27 years as the dominant party in the EPRDF before they lost power. Their first legislative act was to divide the country into ethnic federal administrative regions. This act profiled people by their ethnicity and affected where they lived and worked. Ethnic federalism afforded the TPLF, which represented a minority ethnic group of 7 million in a country of over 117 million, complete control. And ethnicity became weaponized to keep people divided. School children were taught a curriculum of hate by including grievances that were over 100 years old into the education system so that people perceived each other as enemies. Throughout the ethnic federal administration, the TPLF maintained the upper hand by controlling the military and placing its members as the power behind local governors. Mass incarceration of political opponents, human rights violations, corruptions were rampant. And during elections, EPRDF always won to the tune of 100%. Economically, the TPLF completely bankrupted the country by taking billions of dollars to offshore accounts. The UN report of 2015 states that the TPLF drained the country's coffers at the rate of $2 to $3 billion a year, which is as high as half of the country's annual budget. Almost all of the hard currency was stolen. With the funds they stole, they established themselves as a financial and intellectual elite. They inserted themselves in key positions internationally, including the UN, and of course, the most prominent member, WHO's director, Tedros Adhanom. They inserted themselves into Amnesty International and other prominent and influential organizations. They bought their way into the hearts of some Western elites. This money is now also being used to buy lobbyists, unethical journalists, and influencers, and in the utilization of deep fake news to develop false narratives. There's so much to unpack, but I will focus on the term ethnic cleansing and genocide, because right now, the TPLF, who was and still is the victimizer, is claiming these words by usurping them from the actual victims. And sadly, Washington is echoing their lies. For example, the TPLF's manifesto, and I'm going to start there because we don't talk a lot about that manifesto, states that the Amhara are the enemy of the Tigray people. They do not talk about a party, they do not talk about a group, they do not talk about a political entity, but wholesale, the Amhara people are the enemy. I think this manifesto probably is the only one of its kind in the world since the Nazis that names a whole group of people as a natural enemy. Historically, even the cruelest dictators like Genghis Khan, when he conquered China, he went in and elevated the Chinese culture and worked towards integration. When Alexander went to India and Persia, he elevated their cultures also, not the TPLF. They came as a Trojan horse and started their destruction of Ethiopia from the very beginning. Their aim was, unless we rule, there will be no Ethiopia. And to quote one of their leaders, C. Abraha, who said, "We rule or we will make Ethiopia into Syria or Yemen." What kind of a statement is that from a leader of a country? This is really very, very tragic. So I would like to go a little bit over the ethnic cleansing that TPLF did in the 27 years it ruled, and since also in the last 2 years, since it lost its political power. The northern area they annexed and called Western Tigray, which is actually Walqait and Tsalant, and mostly inhabited by Amara. The TPLF came up with special ways to decimate the Amara population there. One of the really cruel ways was to dig mass graves in the ground and put mostly the men in there and smoke them to death so they do not waste bullets. Women were raped and forced into marriage with the resettled combatants. And forced sterilizations were conducted on Amara women and girls which ultimately reduced the population by 2 million the year the census, that 2 years during the census. And of course, now it's compounded by more. This, by the way, was under the watch of the WHO director, Dr. Tedros Adhanom, who was the health minister at the time. Mass massacres and mass murders were committed by security and special forces in Somalia, Oromia, and southern Ethiopia. Thousands were killed or maimed, women raped, and in prisons, rape was used as a form of torture on both men and women. Villages destroyed, leaving refugees to flock neighboring countries. The TPLF, of course, as you all know, lost its power in 2018 because it was marginalized by a coalition force within the APRDF. So Abiy Ahmed became PM and instituted reforms. But the TPLF from their homeland in Tigray, they continued to fund, train, in some cases fight alongside disruptive forces. So I must say, though, that the people of Tigray were also very much oppressed by the TPLF. Tigray was like a police state. That's what people said throughout these years. So the TPLF funded disruptive forces like the Oromo extremist OLF Shani to create instability in Ethiopia. Millions of Amaras, Orthodox Christians, Oromos, Somalis, Gedios, Konso, Walaita, Afars, and other ethnic groups have been killed or displaced from their place of residence. During this time, there have been 115 armed attacks in all. Ethiopia now has one of the largest internally displaced people in Africa. And in November, the TPLF militia and Youth League identified and executed over 1,000 Amara day laborers in a single day in Maikadra, which is now the killing fields of Ethiopia. And from there, they went on to the refugee camps to continue with the negative narrative and to become the victims. At this time, so I'm done with this part of my presentation. So what we would like to do is we would like to show you a clip of an eyewitness to the Anwak massacre, where an entire village. Oh, okay. So you know what? Haile is in. So the clip we can do after I have the discussion with Haile, okay? So, and that's even better that way. Okay, thank you. So let Haile in.
Wasi,
Yes, Haile.
when does it start? 5, isn't it? My time 5?
No, you know, it already started, but we're so happy to hear your voice. So let's kind of put everybody in dark and then and we will continue. I said I trusted you will be here. Okay, where are you? I don't see Haile. So can everybody kind of turn your cameras off? Can everybody turn your cameras off? Everybody except Haile? Where is he?
Camera is off too. I can see him.
Everybody turn your cameras off. Oh, no, closer. No. Wait, oh, where is it? Oh, hold on one second. Why isn't this so close? And then speaker view. So let's just do speaker view, you guys, and then you can all see the speakers, okay? All right. Okay. So Yemi, I don't know why you're on the speaker view. Huh? Yeah, hold on. So when I'm speaking, I should be on the speaker view right now. I don't see that. Producer? We have a film man here, so gotta do.
I see Haile on camera. He's on camera. I see it. You might want to switch to gallery view so you can see him.
No, I can see Haile now. But I see Glean right in the front, in the middle. But okay, I think we can start with this. Okay, welcome, my friend Haile Gerima. I am very honored to call you that. And we are very happy to have you here to speak to second gen Ethiopians. There are some of us that are a little bit older, but mostly it's for the second gen. And for those of you that don't know Haile Gerima, he's an independent filmmaker and professor of film at Howard University in Washington, D.C. He is a leading figure in third world cinema and a foundational force of the LA Rebellion independent cinema. And he has many films, award-winning films. Sankofa is one of my favorites. And of course, Adwa and African Victory, which all have won him acclaim. But right now, what I find very exciting is he is receiving an award for the, with Sophia Loren. I have to say that I find very, very exciting. He's being recognized for that, and congratulations. Just whatever the award is for, same time with Sophia Loren. I just find that incredible. So congratulations, Haile. Okay, so I would just jump in and I'll just start this off, okay? So why is Adwa important to the second generation Ethiopians?
Well, I don't think it's only for second generation Ethiopians. I think Adwa is, by the very fact that it's a history-making event, to all progressive people, also to all Pan-Africanists, to Africans, and specifically to Ethiopians. It's a very important, significant historical moment. One, this is a historical event that says that imperialism, colonialism, however much armed they are with weapon, they can be defeated by spirit and mindset of people who knows their history. So it's not accidental that, for example, after the Adwa event, it was so significant to all other non-white people, especially. Even in Iran, they had the celebration was so enormous. They used to have fans made out of the image of As Emenilik and Etegit Haitu. Mm-hmm. Just a fan for people to fan their faces. The image, it's in the archives in Paris that I've personally saw. And so even Sudan, for example, a country that we're having a problem now, at the dawn of the defeat of the Italians at Adwa, Ethiopians, Sudanese people who are in constant struggle with Ethiopians danced for a whole week in honor of the triumph and defeat of Italians by an African race. And so to me, it is not just a feel-good, temporary feel-good boost to have. We also have our our history makers, but this is a world, an impact that made a global echo, and later on to a lot of Pan-Africanists, including Nkrumah, Nasser, even Mandela. This is the historical precedent that said, yes, they can be defeated. And that to me is like always, especially we Ethiopians underestimate the impact of that statement, because it's like and that is the crisis I think we have with the Ethiopians in terms of you know, how neglectful we are with this historical legacy.
So when we talk about the historical legacy, how was it also with African Americans and in Latin America? How was Adwa perceived at the time?
It's global first. It's global, and specifically Africans in South Africa, Africans in the United States, in Southern African American churches. It was invoked. It's the historical moment that gave even the mythological aspect of Ethiopia. The mystification of Ethiopia is really generated by that historical legacy. Even in the Caribbean, the impact was completely boundless, because here was a precedent that demonstrated it can be done to Africans who felt so overwhelmed by this white supremacist planet that was in the formation, where it disfigured the African race specifically, although the Asians and Latin Americans, but specifically the Eurocentric Anglo-Saxon cultural virtue. One of its achievement is in its war against Africans to disfigure Africa in the minds of Africans. And in that kind of struggle, many Pan-Africanists would go crazy for. I know, for example, in Black America, Duke Ellington composed a music I'm using now in the kind of part 2 film, where he called a whole jazz piece that's powerful, dedicating it to Menelik, the Lion of Judah. And again, the doctor that went from Haiti, I think.
Yes.
He said, I will be an unpaid doctor of Menelik to protect his health.
Sylvester something.
Yeah. And so many Africans went there. Many Pan-Africanists went there. But it's also, you wouldn't believe it, Ethiopia was at that time, most of the global press was in Addis Ababa. Many imperialists have to first appease Menelik before they ventured in any part of Africa. He was actually becoming a licensor for any transgressions by the colonialists. And so, I mean, of course, over time, you know, it's underplayed in my upbringing. I don't know about you, Wasi. I don't remember. I went to school in Gondar, Jimma, and Addis Ababa. I don't remember a day we celebrated for Adwa. I remember I was looking over pictures I have from Jimma. It was all United Nations Day we were celebrating. And we didn't even know the school, Meazia Hasabat, what it meant within current history, 1935. We didn't know what Balcha Hospital stood. When I went to Shimal Savte, I didn't know what Balcha Hospital was about.
Yeah.
When I went to Shimal Savte, 1935 war hero, I didn't know why it was named, etc. Bakalawaya School, I didn't know what the hell it was. So I speak for my generation. As far as I'm concerned, we were the most miseducated generation of Ethiopians to come at a very critical time, but without the consciousness that we should have had concerning this legacy. And I will
Yeah.
say this, I'll go to say this,
So-
and I think the reasons of why my generation messed up its historical moment is because it didn't know its own history. And one of them was this
Yes.
item, the Adwa item.
Yes, so let me jump in. That's a very good point, because I think not knowing your own history is also what why we didn't give it to our second gen either. We didn't take it as important to do so. But I do want to ask you one more question about these people, these men and women who fought at Adwa barefoot, coming from all over Ethiopia. What united them? Where was the sense of I am, we belong, we are one? What united them? What brought them together?
Well, I think it's amazing now when revisionists talk about it, it denies how multinational, how multicultural, how multi-religious it was. For example, what united them is just, I think, the sovereignty of Ethiopia. You take just Wollo alone. Wollo, Oromo, Islamic Christian place, turned out so big. Nugus Mikael's warriors were fearful in that battle, because you got to know this. It's a war. Ethiopians finished Italians in 3 hours. In 3 hours, at 6 o'clock in the morning, the war was over. And this is like but to me, the spiritual aspect is also important, because Ethiopianism is not religiously oriented only. There's a spiritual part that we always undermine, that all Ethiopians in the end possess, the spiritual, I would say, inner dignity. How dare you, etc., etc. So for me, it's amazing how in my new film, I find so many of these descendants were at Adwa. Their ancestors were at Adwa.
Yeah.
And for them, it's, it's like what Balcha said to, Balcha had a problem with the Emperor Haile Selassie, but when the Italians came the second time, he said, this is the spiritual aspect of it. He said, well, I don't like Haile Selassie. He gave me a hard time, but what am I going to tell Menelik and Taitu when I go? When I die, I left the Adara country to Italians. What am I going to? That is not, to me. It's beyond language. A spiritual statement of saying, I'm not going for my personal problem I had with the king. I will not relinquish the historical legacy of what Adwa was all about, what sovereignty was all about, what not freedom, but keeping the sovereignty of Ethiopia.
So what would you advise? I mean, I know you're very good with the second gen. You're the only one in that age group that they all run to. So what would you advise them? What would you advise them to connect with that? How can they make it into, I mean, it is their heritage, but a living heritage. How can they do that now? Well, especially in Ethiopia and the Ethiopia that we have now, living here,
Well, first, it's to me, the legacy of Ethiopia. I mean, if an Ethiopian person, I'll tell you a story. In Homer's, you find the Greeks, the Carthaginians, and somebody, they were about to go to war again to kill each other. And they couldn't, because Zeus was not there. The god was not there he was the referee of the battle. And they asked, where is he? And they said he's gone to Ethiopia for a wedding, to attend a wedding. That's far back in
Zeus went to a
Greek.
wedding in Ethiopia, the god of the
Yeah,
Greeks.
until he comes back from Ethiopia, the war is not going to commence. That shows you the power of Ethiopia beyond this petty, fabricated, feel high good time. As far as I'm concerned, Ethiopia is ancient, and for me, it's a vitamin that one needs to find oneself, to center oneself. So for young people, to me, it's in studying Ethiopian history. Not only, I mean, I'm not talking about King's history. I'm talking about the traditional aspect of, for example, the way we conduct adversarial relationship through afursata, or under the tree, the oak tree, we gather to rectify, family, sibling, whatever kind of problem we have. But it takes a spiritual integrity. And when I say this, I'm really talking about religion. I'm talking about spiritual integrity is the respect of oneself and the reflections of oneself in another person. And the fact that Ethiopia belongs to all the people, including international people who can drive out of her history personal knowledge and transformation. So for me, young Ethiopians have a lot to, not just because of Adwa, not because of war. I'm talking about even the historical calling of a generation comes from finding one's past. And the past is good, bad, and ugly. And it's not to be denied, but in that past, there's this amazing gold mine that one can harvest to empower and make oneself a history maker. So the last point I would say is young people cannot be spectators of the makings of European history. Young Ethiopians have to be like their ancestors, history makers. The past Ethiopians didn't ask for permission, for license, for a degree from England or America to be history makers. They were history makers. That to me is critical. My problem with the young generation is how much they easily allow the subjugation of their history-making capacity to new colonialism, in whatever form it comes at. This is my...
That is one. Yeah, highly. Yeah. So, yeah. I guess, I hear you, and I hear your emotion around that. Yeah, it's a lot of things that we have to do, to connect with them, and also to those that are willing to be connected, and there's plenty of them, to work with them and bring the history and make it alive.
Wasi, the point here is, I think, to me, especially to see the contemporary divisive historical process that only could make a wretched human being out of all of us.
Yes.
In this kind of time, we want young people who want to be honest, to grow, to change without absolute dogma, without, our generation. One of the things that killed the genuine Ethiopians who wanted to change Ethiopia got lost in the very dogma that became a religion. And in the end, it became counterproductive. And we left Ethiopia confused.
Yes.
I mean, we have not recovered. And again, it's the miseducation of Ethiopians under the Emperor Haile Selassie. Well, however much he was good internationally on Pan-Africanism, the OAU, but when it comes to the crops of students he educated, there was a certain non-synchronic educational process. One, the fact in his period, a British designed school was completely replacing traditional wisdom, traditional knowledge, traditional schools. I grew up looking down upon traditional schools that my father went for Ascola. Ascola was the big thing. Speaking English can even get you a girlfriend. If not, you're out of it. And so the empire of English, the language itself, the work it did on Ethiopians is not yet examined, not examined at all. All these Ethiopians who were miseducated, taking Ethiopia into a terror, were fluent English colonial subject matters.
Yeah.
They're admired for their English. Most of the Ethiopian student leaders are admired when they spoke the good English.
Yes.
In spite of the content. And so for me, young Ethiopians have to really go past us and see where things start to go wrong. And to me, it's in our education. I know when I disengaged with my father is when I became an English student, when I became the student of colonial teachers from Egypt, colonial teachers from India, colonial teachers from Sudan, teaching Ethiopians. That there is something wrong right there. And in our action, when our whole idea of the educated Ethiopians should rule. Who are these educated Ethiopians? What was the standard of their education? And how much did we make inroad in the Ethiopian society? When I told my father when I was speaking to my socialism, he said to me, first, study the Gadam of Ethiopia to understand the origin of socialism. That's what he said to me. He said, socialism, you're studying from Russia, China, study in the monasteries of Ethiopia to understand socialism first. There's nothing that you can't find in your own country that you're looking yonder with your mouth wide open. And so, again, I'm really harping on, my generation that I think left a great deal of even the contemporary confusions. The contemporary confusions we're facing, our generation set it in motion. We set it in motion. Every student movement in Europe, America, Russia, Ethiopia, we unleashed the destabilization or the dislocation aspect of Ethiopia that we are still harvesting to date.
Yeah. So thank you. I mean, Haile, this is very, very important. And I think the second gen that are on this call right now, they can also understand where the issue is with their parents, why we were not able to do what we needed to do for them. So I think we have to move on. And I know we want to continue this conversation. I really, really appreciate that you brought this to us today. And thank you very much, Haile. So let's move on to the next piece.
Okay.
Any final words?
Strong.
Yeah.
Stay strong, girl.
Thank you. Okay, so now before we go into the work groups, I still want us to see the film on the Anwak. It's a short clip because I was talking about the. I know we're doing jumping from one to the other, but it is important to talk about that. And I know we needed time to digest what Haile said right now, but I'm sorry I can't give you that time. Just hold to it. So the reason why I wanted to show you the Anwak film is because of what happened to the Anwak in Gambela and the ethnic, I'm jumping back to ethnic cleansing, is because they're a minority. They are an endangered people who lived on a very fertile land in Ethiopia. And because their land was needed for plantations with corporations from India, that's what happened to the Anwak. So this is a little clip. It's a little hard, but we did not put too many grisly things in there, but just an eyewitness report from there. And this was taken in 2003. This was under the EPRDF. Okay, go ahead.
My husband was one of the first men to be killed. I remember first hearing the sounds of gunfire when the shooting started in front of the regional hospital in Kambala town. Word got out quickly that Anuak men were being killed. Almost immediately, my husband and I heard the sounds of approaching Ethiopian defense soldiers walking towards our house, yelling, "Kill them. Whenever you find an Anuak man, kill him. Today is the day for killing Anuak." All of us had it. My husband wanted to get out of the house and face them, but I pushed him back and blocked the door so he could not leave. The troops came to our door and demanded my husband. When I told them he was not there, they did not believe me. They set our house on fire and started shooting at the house. The smoke became so thick that we could not breathe. My 6-month-old baby started choking on the smoke, so I had to crawl down low through the door. But as soon as I did, they started shooting inside the open door and shot my husband in the stomach, chest, and right arm. But he did not die. He kept telling me, "Mary, go with the baby. Let them kill me." But instead, I jumped on top of him to protect him, holding my crying baby with my other arm. I begged them, "Please, do not kill my husband." One of them grabbed me and started beating me with the barrel of his gun on my back and head. Another one said, "You say this is your land. After today, there will be no more Anuak or Anuak land." He pointed his finger at me and told me to shut up. Just wait and see. They would do to us, Anuak, what was done to the Jews during the Holocaust. 8 soldiers surrounded my husband, repeatedly hitting him with their guns. Then Highlander militia started slashing him on his head, neck, and face with their machetes and hitting him with clubs until his whole face was smashed. He fell down, face forward, towards me. He opened and closed his eyes before his body started jumping. I stopped crying because I could not believe what was happening. I was numb. Then they all left me alone with my husband and baby.
Welcome back. I know it was all very short. I was in an incredible room with Joe and Gannat, and that was really wonderful. And I know I've missed the rest of you, Henok and Kudus and Kalalai and Askwal. I don't see Kalalai here. And Fasil and Mami. Where's Mami? Do you guys see Mami?
I'm here, Wasi.
Oh yeah, there you are. And where's Mami? Say hello so we know you're here. Yeah, there you are. So Mami, could you, all the presenters, I want you to unmute yourself anyway, okay? And so I would like you guys to do a short because we were all in different rooms, a very short summary. So since I have you right in front of me, Kalalai, I'll start with you. So just a quick 2 to 3 minutes, real quick.
Sure, absolutely. I think a bulk of what we talked about is, we started with the history of TPLF, which a majority of which you covered, Wasi. So we thought it was important to focus on what happened with this current situation in Ethiopia. So we talked a little bit details about how the war was started and initiated and triggered by the TPLF. And then the part we didn't get a chance to do is how can people get involved, right? So what can we do now, especially with this generation, right? So I thought it's important to understand and be aware, number one, that there is a war being waged on truth. The disinformation, using keywords that stoke emotional responses like genocide and ethnic cleansing, completely switching the narrative, right? So I think it's important, and I feel it's truly never been important to act and show empathy and compassion, but at the same time, be willing to act. This compassion has to involve action. I know Haile just mentioned we no longer can afford to be spectators. So it has to involve self-reflection, understanding of the issues, but then we have to move into action. One of the ways we could do that is to get involved on social media with Glenn, Unity for Ethiopia, Voices for Ethiopia. And since the program is actually celebrating Adwa, I think one of the most important things we can do is learn why Adwa continues to fascinate people till this day, right? It happened 125 years ago, but it was the selfless act and just the culture of leadership strategy that continues to fascinate the people. So
we only had 7
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to interrupt you, and it's very exciting. I want to go on that, but let's have everybody speak a little bit. So next we have Henok.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat what everyone said in terms of time, but yeah, it was a super speed version. Ba'acharu, there was the motto of Haile Selassie University, what is today Addis Ababa University. Kullo amakaru wazasanaya asna'u. Examine everything and hold on to that which is good. And so the idea is to look back towards Adwa and our victory against King Umberto. Look towards our victory against the fascist Benito Mussolini and truly examine what was it in the institutions of Ethiopia that allowed for such unity and unification, which is also one of the questions that you had asked and Professor Haile answered to an extent. And, looking at those, how could we build upon those? We hyper-modernized and we used those colonial institutions so that we were not defeated directly by European powers, but through subterfuge and this indirect long-term plan, eventually we've unrooted ourselves for 50 years. At the same time, when we look at our culture, whether it's the court intrigue or the daily conversations, the yilunta, the minyulinyal, what will people say about me, of our culture, we see a very high context society and a very inferential society, which knows how to read between the lines, that knows how to read the subtext. And so we take that part of our culture, applying it to the media. When we consume VOA, understanding the perspective that they're coming from. When we consume Al Jazeera or BBC or the Prime Minister's Facebook and Twitter, or when we listen to Prince Ermias out in the greater DC area, or when we establish ourselves by connecting ourselves not just to these systems, but to real individuals with skin in the game and soul in the game there in Ethiopia, especially the elders of our community. And I recommended one article and one book. The article is from Elias Wandemu of Sahai. He recently wrote in the Los Angeles Review of Books. You can check that out. I think it paints the picture very well and traces everything back to Adwa, actually, and is wondering if not there would be a potential for a third world war centered. He believes China is the big ally of Ethiopia, but I've seen a lot of statements from the Russian Orthodox Church's patriarch that makes me think Russia would be on Ethiopia's side as well, which puts people in America in a weird position who may agree with domestic policies of some US politicians, but when it comes to foreign policy against Ethiopia, they may be on opposite ends. And it's a weird cognitive dissonance, I know, for a lot of people in our community. And then finally, James Burnham's Machiavellians, the Defenders of Freedom, which talks about the Italian school of political scientists. So it's interesting, I'm talking about this proud Ethiopian stuff against the Italians who are against us, but that doesn't shut me off to the brilliance of the school of political realism from the Italian school of political science, which matches our own culture of understanding how to read between the lines. One example I didn't use is one person in Ethiopia will say, "Urboñal," I'm hungry, to say that they're hungry. Another person would say, "ጨዋ ሰው ደጅ ቆሟል," a polite person is standing outside. And the culture that understands how to read between the subtext of a polite person is standing outside should be able to read the subtext of the various media outlets.
Thank you, Henok. I love to hear what you say, and it's really very invaluable. So I'll go ahead and present, but meanwhile, fill the survey, the others. Thank you, Gannet. Go ahead, Joe.
No worries. So I'll just keep it brief. We talked about politics, how to start a campaign, the ins and outs of how to do campaigning, effectively, both to do your own issue campaign, to do an advocacy campaign, or to lobby members of Congress or other elected officials. If you have any questions about that, if you're interested in talking about that, just shoot me a DM or an email. My email is joe.tesfaye@mail.house.gov, or you can just DM me on social media. I'm just at Joe Tesfaye everywhere.
Thank you so much, Joe. Yeah, Joe works in Congress, and I didn't even have the time to introduce all of these wonderful people that are here today, but maybe we'll have them back and you'll all come back to know who they really are. So let's just take a couple of questions, just a couple, and then we have to close the survey, but make sure you fill out the survey because we will connect with you. We will get you information. Yemi, please put, so if any of the speakers have anything else they'd like to add, I'll give you a couple of minutes, and then 5 minutes before we close, we will have our wrap up.
Wase, if I may say something.
Yes, go ahead.
I think there was a lot that was mentioned here today, I think, but I'd be remiss if we didn't mention there's also a whole, this third element and international actors behind everything that's going on as well. Number one, Ethiopia's geopolitical spot, and then we can't forget about Gerd and the grand, Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, Africa's largest hydroelectric dam that's being built. So that, in a sense, will become this generation's Adwa. So I think it's important that we realize that, and I just wanted to mention.
Thank you so much, Kalare. You are so right. That would be this generation's Adwa. And the other very important thing that I think I see the direct connection to Adwa is Ethiopia was under a state of siege at that time, and Ethiopia is under a state of siege. And at that time, it looked like impossible enemies, and it looks like that too. But what got us through were our unity and what Haile talked about, them knowing themselves.
I have one question that someone asked. I think A.E. Worku, he said, what steps should the second generation do?
Okay, so second gen, I would like one of you to answer this question. Since it's a question of engagement, Mami, I'll give it to you.
Thank you. Actually, one of the things that I was rushing to get to really was just that. What can the second gen do? And instead of us telling what the second gen should be doing, I was hoping that if things were to happen for us, or if A, B, C, and D were to happen for us, we would like to engage. The first question I wanted to actually ask was, so if you were not engaged, what's deterring you? And that's where we were in the discussion, or at least in the presentation. What the second gen can do really is taking time to learn things like today's event, learning the background, learning the historical background, the tradition, the culture, however minute, however traditional, however African it appears to be. and really engaging, listening without necessarily having to think about it's something that we, that had happened 99 years ago, that was with my parents. I am completely and 100% assimilated to the American culture, and, success comes from that. Abandoning one's culture, abandoning one's background or root does not necessarily qualify for the success, does not necessarily mean that, we're better off one way or another. So for the second generation really is to maybe look back and why the first generation was pushing for certain things and giving it the benefit of the doubt and spending some time and reconnecting, I think, is important. Reconnecting with our root. When the second generation, and I know it was asked in my team or in my room, what is the difference or what does it mean? What's the first and second generation? So we kind of talked about that. So if you happen to be here the very first generation and then you got married and had children, your offsprings are your second generation. The first generation is the very first generation that came here as an immigrant and assimilated into this society, right? And we, the first generation has pushed so much for certain values, certain customs, certain traditions, things that we take to heart. One of it being our culture, one of it being our value for education. And I think we did an amazing job raising second generation that even the US, like in a lot of articles talk about how the Ethiopian immigrants or the second generation Ethiopians are successful when it comes to higher education. 100% of high school graduates get accepted into college. 90%, 98%, 90-some% in different states complete high school. Well, we did good. We've done an amazing job putting that out, right? And then now I think what we're doing is we're kind of stopping and saying, well, we need you to come along with the rest of the staff too, and keeping up with the root, really keeping with the historic, and the second generation just maybe spend some time reconnecting and taking that to heart as much as we instilled. And I say we because I'm considered first generation. My kids are second generation. I'm doing this at home and being very deliberate about teaching our children the Ethiopian courage. You want to look it up. I don't want to take too much time, but the Ethiopian courage is what we heard from the beginning of this event. What actually won the Battle of Adwa? That Ethiopian courage, that Ethiopianness, that Ethiopian pride. Reconnect to that and see what happens. And that's what drives all of us. And that's why we're here today on a Saturday talking to you. So the second generation, I say reconnecting and maybe not necessarily abandon what seemed to be a tradition or an old style or the Habesha kind of thing, Habesha parents or Habesha moms is what we are called now. And just finding the value in it, I think, is important.
Thank you. So
question for Henok. It came to Henok specifically. They asked him if he can comment on the current Ethiopian situation and TPLF. They want them really briefly in 2 minutes.
It has to be real brief because we will continue with all that. Well, we'll bleed into overtime. Okay, go ahead, Henok. Just jump in that.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say. I will say this because we're talking about, related to the talk that I gave about misinformation. Mm-hmm. Whenever you hear the words international community, whenever you read that phrase in any media outlet, what they are referring to is American hegemonic control of institutions which on the outside look as if they involve everyone in all of these places. And one thing I'll remind you, it's not Adwa, but this is World War II. One of the things that the League of Nations did, which was probably the worst thing, is they did weapons sanctions, an embargo on both fascist Italy and on Ethiopia. At the time, Italy had access elsewhere, whereas Ethiopia didn't. And especially when people are talking nowadays about equity versus equality, if you view that action as equal and unbiased and neutral, you would be wrong. Yeah. And so be skeptical every time you see that. And a lot of times we hear words like Ethiopia's the strategic area in the Horn, or what would the international community think of this? And some of, especially the digital Weyane or the digital TPLF, are very scary. I saw one the other day on Twitter asking for an invasion of Asmara and Eritrea. And it's very startling, the sort of keyboard warriors and coffee shop revolutionaries that don't have to face the consequences of these things. So to be honest, I'm monitoring the situation, trying to be as least biased as possible by literally listening to all the voices on the matter. But I'm not super scared of, what's to remain of TPLF at this point. They're slowly and systematically being rounded up. What I am more frightened of is people jumping on their social media campaigns and getting international actors. And what that really means is getting American troops there. And, they begin by saying they want to send in aid workers, but more often than not, those aid workers are themselves spooks, for those who know that. So it's just being very careful, not like refusing all sorts of foreign aid, but being very wary of that, because the track record of that is horrible. And the kind of most recent example I will give is, if you remember back to Libya, whatever we thought of Gaddafi, the result is slavery in Libya. And whatever you thought of Saddam Hussein, ISIS is certainly worse. So just being conscious of what exactly would it mean for that level of military intervention, and respecting what we began talking about today, which is the sovereignty of the Ethiopian nation state.
Thank you so much, Enoch. I mean, this is so exciting. We definitely need to discuss this and have more events like this, but please do the questionnaire and we'll connect with you. We are now at the last minutes. And so could you just wrap it up for us?
Sure.
We could go over, just do what you plan to do.
Yeah. Sure. Okay, so I'll try to be quick. Thank you once again for joining us. As we are wrapping up, on behalf of Glean, we thank you for joining us today. You made an important decision and we sincerely appreciate you for that. I myself come from a huge family, and having a handful of second-gen cousins throughout the US, I would be lucky to have my calls or text messages returned timely, especially on the weekend. So special thanks to you all, and we hope to see you in the near future. Today will be a new day for second-gen Ethiopian Americans and friends who have come together to be empowered by our shared history. Some of you made a conscious decision to be with us, while others came to join out of curiosity, to know a little more than you did yesterday or day before, or simply to make sense of the current events in Ethiopia. Make no mistake that your collective decisions to be a part of our event will always be pride for Ethiopia, as you have taken the first step to connect with your heritage and face our current challenges in 2021 in the Euro-American world. It's also a new day in our community for the generation that came before us, as it is a day of commitment to share their wisdom as we can carry our legacy forward. Let's commit right now to make knowledge the center of our focus. Knowledge to know about our history, not the history that has been written in the age of social media, but truly the history that took place in the way our ancestors lived at the time. Secondly, to continue learning about our place and existence in the Euro-American society with constant changes in all areas, historical, political, or social media. Last but not least, through the knowledge and the wisdom we've gathered, let's build our confidence and empower ourselves and each other to be the voice of Ethiopia and commit to pass that to the next generation. Please join us in this journey to carry the Ethiopian legacy forward. We are working in the realm of social media monitoring and response team via Telegram, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, as well as correspondence to major organizations, including international organizations like the UN and Amnesty International reporting. Also, we have the advocacy team engaged at a local level to influence our senators and House of Representatives in Congress. Let's be part of the solution. We need your voice. We need your voice to spread the truth of Ethiopia in our world. Let me say that again. We need your voice to spread the truth of Ethiopia in our world. We would like you to be with us. We would like you to work with us, be a part of Glean, and in return, we are ready to be your resource. Look, I understand the challenges. The few times I get to talk to my second-gen cousins about Ethiopia, often what comes up for them is the guilt of not knowing the language and the history. In addition, they feel the disconnection leads to their struggles of understanding the geopolitics of Ethiopia. Let's not allow these feelings of disconnect to stop us. This is a critical time for us to come together. Let's take the opportunity to move away from the guilt and use this time to empower yourselves to learn more and achieve greater influence over our future. Thank you. Hope I made it in time.
Thank you, Kadis. So please finish the questionnaire, the survey. It's really very, very important. And yeah, and you heard her message. We do want to work with you. We need you. We need your savvy. We need people to work with us, like she said, on Twitter and all of social media. What the TPLF is really beating us on is those things. So connect with us, fill out the questionnaire, the survey. We have your emails. We will connect with you and we will have more events like this. I'm excited. I learned a lot. I hope you all did too. Bye. We'll just leave this on. Maybe we could have a little music while people finish the survey. Yeah?
Music would be good.
Yeah, music. If you want to, Mr.